Hi, in this video, we're going to be talking about doing research in non-legal sources. So you might be asking yourself, well, this is supposed to be a legal research class. Why are we talking about this? Well, there have been a lot of white papers and studies done that have asked managing attorneys what types of skills new associates need and what types of research they need to do. And one of the things that's often requested for new attorneys is to do research in sort of non-legal, not strictly legal, I should say, areas, including things like looking for public records, research on people, research on corporations, or maybe statistics. So this is a very broad overview of this topic. So for each of these things, I'm going to show you a couple of places that you could look, give you a few tips, but it's in no way going to be in detail on any one topic. So it's sort of the bird's eye view of this non-legal sources type of research. Okay, so let's begin. So what types of things might you be asked to look for? So you might need to find out information about your own clients, other parties, or perhaps witnesses in your case. You might want to know information about judges or opposing counsel or expert witnesses. You might need information about a corporation for transactional as well as litigation matters. So you might need to know about a financial standing of a company or what its subsidiaries are, or who is the agent to serve process on, those types of things. For litigation matters, a lot of times you'll be asked to find statistics to buttress an argument that you're trying to make in your client's favor. So those are just some examples of types of research that you might be asked to do. So why might you be asked to do this type of research? Well, I mentioned registered agent to serve process. I talked about public company documents. Sometimes there's quite a wealth of documents that are available for public companies because they have required filings under the federal rules of the SEC and the laws of the securities laws. So there's quite a wealth of information that you can find online for public companies. So you might be looking for past cases of opposing counsel, so you want to know how they've argued things in the past, what clients they've represented, how successful they've been, if they've appeared before a certain judge, all those types of things you can find out about opposing counsel. You can look for prior testimony or to see the experience of an expert witness you might be thinking of hiring. You might want to find out factual information about witnesses who are going to be appearing in a particular case. So again, these are just examples. There's probably other things that you might need to look up. So what are the sources? Well, for lawyers, judges, and expert witnesses, there are directories. There were a number of directories mentioned in the nutshell. When we're on Lexis, there's a category called directories we'll look at, and the same on Westlaw. There's a few other categories that are separate from the directories online. On Lexis, there's a tool called the Litigation Profile Suite we'll look at. On Bloomberg Law, you can do a people search, which includes some prominent lawyers and judges. And on Westlaw, there's a tool called the Profiler, which we can use. One tool specific to Massachusetts, and if you've worked in a law firm locally, you might have seen it, is the Massachusetts Lawyer's Diary and Manual. It's a red book that has a brief listing of different judges and some information about the courthouse, as well as an actual paper diary. I don't know if anyone uses those anymore, but it is a good source to find out information about judges in courts. Okay, as well as there's some brief information usually on the court website about judges that you could look up. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about public records law, the law itself, but I did want you to be aware of it, and I gave you an assignment to read the overview of the Guide to Massachusetts Public Records Law. This is a PDF, a fairly substantial PDF prepared by the Secretary of State, and I'm only asking you to read a very short part. There's a lot more to it, including a lot of exemptions that if you were working in this field or had to make a public records request, you would need to be aware of. But I did want to make you aware of this because a lot of things that you might need for a case are not going to be available publicly online, and you might need to actually request records from a public official in Massachusetts, And so this is a little information about what the law is and how you would go about doing that, similar to a FOIA request you might be thinking of at the federal level. And so I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I wanted you to have a few references to this. If it's something you get asked at work, you could refer back to this information. Okay. So what are the sources that we do have available for public records? Well, for people, there's a couple of good things on Lexis and Westlaw, but they're not accessible on our academic passwords, so I have a screenshot to show you of those, just if you have them at work, so you'll be aware that it's a place that you can go to find out information about people. For example, asset reports, arrest records, marriage, sometimes credit information, those types of records. There is a little bit of information, not much that you can actually get online, but it will explain what's available or how to go about requesting it at the Massachusetts Public Records Division. That's at the SEC website. And then for other like free resources to find people or paid for other subscription, maybe less expensive subscription, for example, there's a lot of credit reporting agencies. I gave you this web guide from an authoritative source that you could look at to find other sources of databases for people, information about people. Okay, so I promised you a couple of screenshots. So this is a sample document from Westlaw Next that shows you the kind of information you might be able to find out about a person using the resources if you have them. As I said, they're not on our academic subscription, but you can see there's things like arrest records, is there any kind of bankruptcy records, asset information, that type of thing. And also on Lexis Advanced, there's a public records database that you might have access to at work, and you can get things like criminal records, death records, locating a person, asset reports. So similar categories of information. So we can also look for public records for companies. It's going to be easiest to find records for publicly listed companies, so companies that have stocks that have been registered with the SEC and have stock on one of the stock markets. And these are the sources for some of the company information. As I said, it's mostly going to be public company information, although there are some company profiles for private companies, and I'm also going to mention one other source in a minute. But on Bloomberg Law, it's in the database called Company Profiles. Lexis has a similar company profile database, which has, you can get reports about various companies with financial information, executive offices, that type of thing. On Westlaw, unfortunately, most of that is in the public records database that I mentioned that we don't have access to. But I will show you they have one source that was mentioned in the reading, the Hoover source, so I'll show you that quickly when we go on to Westlaw. Of course, nowadays company websites are a great place to find information about companies, and that would be private as well as public, although public also, again, tends to have more information online. One source that we can use to find out information about companies that are registered to do business in Massachusetts is the corporate filings at the Secretary of State website, and I've given you the URL here, and we'll take a quick look at that website when we do some searching online. Some other sources I wanted to mention are a good way to find information about companies are dockets, which we've done before. We did some research in dockets, so I wanted to remind you about that. And then for public companies, the filings that they are required to make with the SEC, as I mentioned, often have tons of information that's really helpful. So they're often called EDGAR filings, which is the database where they're filed, or SEC filings, or public company filings. They could be called different things on different databases. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about those EDGAR or SEC filings. These are where you can find them. On Westlaw, it's in the Business Law Center. On Lexis, the database is called SEC Filings. On Bloomberg Law, it's EDGAR, and then I gave you the free source, which is a pretty good search engine, which is at the sec.gov website. So this isn't specific to Massachusetts, but of course you can look up companies who do business or are registered or located in Massachusetts on these more general sites. So one tip I have for you is a really great place to start to look for information about a public company is the annual report or 10K. And that's because due to the SEC rules, that's where a lot of important information is filed. And again, this is a very broad overview of this topic. You could do this in a lot more detail, but I just wanted to give you a few little hints here. Okay, and this is a reminder that when you're looking at dockets, this is another good place to find out information about companies or even individuals, lawsuits that have been against them, or by looking at the underlying filings, you might find other employment contracts, employee manuals, all kinds of things might have been required to have been filed or been filed in a particular case. I also wanted to mention, and this was included in the reading, there were a lot of statistics mentioned, different sources for statistics, some of which we have access to and some we don't. The one that I'm going to show you when we go online to do a search is this one. That's a general listing of different websites, actually. And again, these are not necessarily specific to Massachusetts, but could contain Massachusetts-specific information. A lot other things that you might be asked to look for, statistics about the courts if you're working with the court system, the Bureau of Justice statistics, so it has criminal statistics there, so you might need to look at if you're working in a criminal matter, how many people are incarcerated, is that rate going up, is it going down, how many people are being held in custody based on race, gender, those types of issues. For Massachusetts specific information, it varies a lot depending on the department. So you're going to want to check the agency websites, and I gave you one example, and it's just one. Lots of other information available on different websites of different agencies, but this is the Department of Public Health, and there's some current statistics that are available there that might help you in a particular case that you had that had to do with any of the statutes or regulations that are governed by the department or enforced by the Department of Public Health. The final thing I gave you is called Mass Facts, and it's put together by Boston.com, which is the Boston Globe, and it's, again, a web guide. So it's not itself a database, it's a list of other sources that you might find helpful, and that one is specific to Massachusetts. So the final source I wanted to mention is this Journalist Toolbox. It's, again, just a web guide, so a list of other sources, topics like how to submit a FOIA request for information. So this is geared towards journalists, of course, but sometimes attorneys are asked to do a similar type of investigative research about clients or witnesses that are involved in a particular matter or case that they're working on. So that's the general overview. As I mentioned, for this class, think of it more as a bird's eye view. We're talking about a lot of different topics, and this is to give you an idea of types of resources that you might be able to use when doing non-legal research.